Hello and welcome back to another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I'm Eric. I did 11 years in prison and I talk about prison stuff. Today we're talking about Asatru, and we're talking about whether it's a legit religion or is it a front for gang activity. Is it a little bit of both, and what could possibly be done about that? Be sure to like and subscribe. Big shout out to my Patreon patrons, Kenneth Hyman and Brian Kitchens. Thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate it. If you want to join my Patreon page, there's a link in the description. There's also links to my PayPal and stuff like that if you want to support the channel that way. But let's get into the video. This is kind of a relevant topic because for several years, guys who were a part of the Asatru religion have been discriminated against. Prisons across the United States have accused these guys of participating in security threat group activity, given them additional security points, flagged them. However, basically, a security threat group inside of prison, that means you're a part of a gang. And guys all over the United States who are locked up are being tagged as members of a security threat group simply because they claim allegiance to a certain religion. I don't think that's right. I don't think you should be discriminated against at any point for your religious beliefs. Your freedom of religion is a constitutionally protected right in the United States, and it's just not okay to treat people differently based on their religion. Asatru is very much a legitimate religion. In this video, I'm kind of treating Asatru inside of prison specifically. However, you can go online and you can find all sorts of stuff about Asatru and what the beliefs are, and you'll see that there are very many people devoted to Asatru. They take it very seriously. It's a part of who they are, and it's a part of their lifestyle. Asatru was founded in the 1970s in Iceland. It basically means, Asatru literally means, the faith of the Asir. So it is the belief in these old Norse Germanic gods that we associate typically with the Vikings. However, it was just something of the northern peoples, I guess you could say. The Scandinavians, the Norwegians, the Danes, the Swedes. And it has a strong historical foundation there. Granted, it was only established in the 1970s, but if you look at the Norse sagas, if you look at history books and what the Vikings believed in and what the northern peoples believed in, you'll definitely run into the Asir. The Asir were a subset of these Scandinavian, German, Nordic deities. And Asatru uses literary sources like the sagas, the Eddas, the Havamal, stuff like that, as its source material. That's what it's based on, and you have different things that are characteristics of other religions. You think about a religion, you think about the religion trying to answer questions of life after death, or the meaning of life, or what happened, to create this world that we live in. What are the end of times like? And Asatru talks about all that. There's also code of conduct for daily living, a moral value system in place. All the things that you would come to expect from any world religion is present in Asatru. So then we have to ask the question, if it has all these characteristics of a legitimate religion, why is it being treated like a gang? The answer is simply because in prison, it often operates like a gang. Asatru attracts many people who have been in gangs or who are in gangs. Guys like the ABs, the Raw Boys, whatever, various white groups will join Asatru, and kind of, you get that gang mentality, that gang mindset. And this is not me talking shit on gangs. I don't want anyone to take it that way. This is me talking about a religion and how that religion might be preserved inside of a prison. Because if something isn't done about this, eventually maybe we could see Asatru being taken out of prisons and people not being able to practice their faith at all. That would be a worst case scenario, and I hope that never happens. But Asatru does very much operate like a gang in most Kansas prisons. I was a friend of the call-out in Winfield. I didn't join the call-out, but I went to the call-out. I drank from the same horn as these guys. I scold with these guys. We did the whole thing. And the reason why I was welcome to the call out kind of had to do with who I was, why I was in prison, and my Swedish heritage. I actually have the immigration papers from when my great-grandfather came to the United States from Sweden. And there's just a lot of respect there. Guys who are a part of the Asatru call-out, in general, people who are members of Asatru, if they actually live that lifestyle, if that is truly what they're about, they place a high value on certain things. And there's a level of respect there. But oftentimes with Asatru call-outs, you can't just go to the Asatru call-out if you practice Asatru on the streets. Let's say you go to prison and all of a sudden you hit this yard and you're going to put a hammer on and go to the Asatru call-out. It doesn't work like that. You have to earn your hammer. You have to go through your rites of progression. You have to do a whole bunch of stuff. And sometimes people see that as kind of a prospecting period. And for some call-outs that are actually operated as a gang, that's kind of what it is, but not all call-outs are like that. For example, when I was a friend of the call-out in Winfield and I was attending, not once did I hear gang politics ever discussed. The call-out was made up of mostly old heads, guys who had done time and been doing time, and who had more time to do, who were kind of laid back, chill. They seen a few things. They learned a few things. They were pretty well established, and they had pretty level heads, and they weren't trying to make the call out about gang politics. The thing is, you could make the same accusation regarding gang politics about a number of call-outs in prison. Sometimes a Native American call-out operates that way. Sometimes a Muslim call-out operates that way. But it doesn't always operate that way. It's not always operated as a gang. Many times you'll see an ebb and flow of how the call-outs operated based on who you have in there. If you have a bunch of laid-back dudes who are old heads who would like to preserve their call-out, chances are it's not going to be operated as a gang. If you have a bunch of young bucks who really don't give a shit about the call-out because they're getting out in a year, 2 years, whatever, they're just going to run that call-out any old way and probably use it for some stupid shit. If we look at the characteristics of a gang, you have 3 or more people, usually family members, associates, friends, who identify with a certain region, or they claim a certain territory, or maybe they identify with a certain community, and they participate in criminal activities. I guess that would be a very basic rundown of a gang. Oh yeah, and then you add in a organizational structure and leadership. Well, if we look at those characteristics, we could find that in just about any religious group. I think the difference is when you go to a more mainstream religion like Christianity, one of the most popular religions in the world, you'll have a minority that participate in criminal activities, and the majority of people are there for the right reasons. The problem is when the majority of your group or congregation or devotees is involved in criminal activity. That's where you run into issues. But there have been a lot of shady people who have gotten involved with Asatru, and they didn't want to leave group politics out of it. Anytime you go to a religious group, you have to consider the entire group when you're engaged in criminal activity. There's an accountability thing. When you're engaging in shady stuff in prison, you should always be asking yourself, is this going to come back on my cellie? Is this going to come back on my friends? Is this going to come back on my call-out? And that's one of the distinctions between a convict and an inmate. A convict does his own time. Okay? He minds his business. He makes sure that other people are not going to be negatively affected by his actions. And the same thing applies to a call-out. If you're doing some shady stuff, you got to make sure that's not going to come back on the call-out. And if you're in leadership in a call-out, you need to make sure that all that gang stuff stays at the door. Some of these lawsuits that have been filed against various states for discriminating against Asatru, some of these lawsuits have been semi-successful. And they've gotten quite a bit of attention from the media, and I think that's a really good thing. But now you have to follow up on that and say, all right, our call out is protected, but let's take this call out and leave the group politics out of it. Let's leave the gang politics out of it. Let's take any illegitimate activities away from the call out. What you do in your own time is your business. What you do in the call out affects all of us. So let's not bring that into the call out. That's kind of my take on the situation. And I don't mean to stick my nose where it doesn't belong. I've been to the call out. I'm friends with a lot of those guys, and respectfully, this is what I would like to see happen. I hope that the guys who are involved in Asatru in prison, I hope they continue to file lawsuits if they're discriminated against, and I hope they can follow up and make some changes in the call out so that this doesn't happen again. I don't think it's fair that people get gang points put on them just because they say, hey, I believe in Asatru. I don't think that's right. Before ending this video, I also want to give a word of warning to anybody who is a practitioner of Asatru or Odinism or Norse paganism. If you're looking at going to prison, don't think that you can just put a hammer on and go to the call out and that's going to be okay. Don't think that you're going to be able to just run around and call yourself an Asatru, and that's going to be okay. Because in most prisons that I've been, those guys do operate like a gang. And I hope that changes. I hope that Asatru can, at some point, no longer be associated with gang activity, because it really does have some beautiful aspects to the faith. And it's part of my heritage, and I don't really like when it's associated with bullshit. But it does operate like a gang in most prisons, and they're not going to take too kind to you just showing up and wearing a hammer. If they don't know you, you haven't been through your ROPs and all that. So keep that in mind. And also be cautious of any tattoos you get. I'm going to tell you a story. I had this buddy named Tim, and he was Asatru at some point, and he had a bunch of runes tattooed all over him on his back and stuff. He even had mom tattooed on him and runes on his back, I think it was, or his shoulder. But he converted to Christianity, and about 10 years after he had initially practiced Asatru, one day he was in the shower, and an Asatru was in the shower, and he saw Tim's tattoos, and he said, hey man, are you a member of the call out? And Tim's like, no. And he's like, well, what's up with those tattoos? He said, well, I used to practice Asatru back in the day, but I converted to Christianity and I changed up my life and stuff. Well, word got back to the call out, and they basically said, hey, you need to cover up those tattoos, get a cover up done, or we're going to cut those tattoos off of you. And Tim ended up having to check in over it, because, you know, you're not going to fight 15 or 20 people, and he didn't have the means to get a cover-up at the time, so he ended up checking in. Kind of one of those weird situations that people run into in prison where, you know, there's kind of a no-win outcome. You know, you get beat up, stabbed, etc., get a tattoo cut off you, you cover up a tattoo, you pay X amount of money to get the tattoo, you pay X amount of money to get it covered up, and now you also lose something that was an important part of your story, because most tattoos have significance. Or, you know, you check in and you get labeled as a check-in. I haven't seen Tim in years. I haven't really seen him since then, but I hope if he's out and about and doing good, I hope you're doing good wherever you're at, Tim. And, yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd share some warnings with you guys and give you an inside look at that, but also kind of give my thoughts on, you know, if Asatru is a legitimate religion, because it is, or is it a gang? Because it's sometimes used as a gang, but just about any religion can be used for a front for criminal activity. Just saying. Anyway, I'm Eric. This has been another episode of From Prison to the Streets. I will see you all later.